whether it's say bless you or start a Bible club or, share your faith or any number of things. And it lays all those things out for people.
I might mention that we posted a couple of days ago the David Limbaugh column in which he used this story as an example. And a number of years ago, he published a book, which we have and did an interview on, called Persecution, where he was giving, I think, in incredible detail all the cases. And I've always jokingly said you need to do a part 2, and he could borrow part of that from the thing that you and Tony Perkins put together on religious hostility. I did get his latest book, and it's on a different topic, but he really needs to do that because now you would have multiple volumes. At that time, that was a very thick book that kind of took you from some of the 1960s, most of them the 1970 and 80, all the way up to about the end of the 20th century or so. It gets a little bit in 2000, but now, I mean, these are coming out every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And these are coming out in areas that he didn't even cover in his book, like the military, for example, and a lot more in the schools than we've ever seen before, which is why I think we've said why people support and should support Liberty Institute.
Well, and I don't talk about this a lot, but people can go right now if they want. They can go to libertyinstitute.org. There is the religious hostilities documents, which collects all of those different attacks from around the country. It's over 1,200 different attacks. So as you read these, you realize very quickly as you page through the what's over 100 pages, but you can do it without having to print it out. You can look at it online. You just start to realize how pervasive it is and how it's everywhere. It's not just, we tend to think, well, it's not going to be in my neighborhood or it's not going to be in it doesn't matter if you're young or you're old, you're rich or you're poor. It doesn't matter if you're in the north or the south or wherever you are. I mean, this is happening right near you, and it will happen to you if it hasn't yet because it's just prolific right now.
We're going to take a break, but let me also mention, I'll hold this up to the camera here, that one of the things I received because I support you is called Liberty in Action, Restoring Religious Liberty in America, and that's something. And on the back, you've got a very good commentary by Kelly and a summary of some of that. So if you haven't already been on their mailing list, we, from time to time, do promote various organizations, and that's one we certainly think very highly of. And the Religious Rights Kit is in the web link. And so if you know a young person, a youth pastor, or someone else maybe in your community that would need to know that, it's a great resource, and we've linked to it today on pointofview.net. We come back, we have a lot to say about ISIS. Of course, the president had some things to say, so we'll hear some of his comments from the press conference and then get your comments. All that coming up right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, a majority of Americans have cell phones, and we're just now beginning to see the impact they're having on our lives. They can be powerful tools, but they can also be significant distractions. I'm sure all of us have noticed people with a cell phone sometimes seem distracted, and after they answer a text or an email, they seem to spend a few minutes trying to recollect their thoughts before they have the interruption. An article in Newsweek magazine documents what many of us have already suspected. There are two major drawbacks to these devices. The first is distraction overload. A study at the University of Illinois found that if an interruption takes place at a natural breakpoint, then the mental disruption is less. If it came at a less opportune time, the user experiences the "where was I?" brain lock. A study at George Mason University found that if the distraction came during a checklist, it was easy to miss an item. Sadly, an airline crash in Madrid a few years ago was attributed to a mistake by a pilot from an interruption-induced error. A second problem is what is called continuous partial attention. Cell phone users like to use their devices while they should be paying attention to something else. Psychologists tell us that we really aren't multitasking, but rather engaging in rapid-fire switching of attention among tasks. It is inevitable that they're going to miss key information if part of their focus is on their cell phone. But another hidden drawback associated is less creativity. Looking at your cell phone while you're doing nothing replaces what we used to do in previous decades. Back then we called it daydreaming. That is when your brain often connects unrelated facts and thoughts. You've probably had some of your most creative ideas while shaving, putting on makeup, or driving. That is when your brain can be creative. Checking email reduces daydreaming. You know, cell phones are here to stay and are powerful tools, but we also need to know the strengths and weaknesses of the technology. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
But once again, if you'd like to join our conversation at any point, 1-800-351-1212. It is our weekend edition. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. And since we were talking about religious liberty, this is a topic that's certainly relevant. That is, once again, the issue of Obamacare, a new iteration. What does that mean?
Well, it means that when the Supreme Court ruled and basically overturned the HHS mandate for certain corporations closely held, they're going back to the drawing board because they're worried now that this is going to begin to affect also the nonprofits. And so it's the eighth accommodation that the Obama administration has written to try to get this argument over with, I guess, about the HHS mandate. And now this one says religious nonprofits can alert the government rather than their insurance company if they don't want to offer birth control. And so in that case, that puts the responsibility on the government to provide this for people, but it's still an action on the part of the company. And the Catholic Church made an immediate statement and said it still involves a process and results in birth control access. And we have to remember this is 4 types of birth control, the types that cause abortions or can cause abortions. So then the government would go ahead and work with the insurance company to provide this. So, they're still involving the nonprofit. And I think they've talked about this stretching back to businesses like Hobby Lobby, which would go totally in opposition to a Supreme Court decision that just came down. So I don't know. I'd love to hear Kelly's take on this, but to me, it's just another accounting gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, when Penna says this is the 8th one, it's not like you can add them all together. There's 8 of these. No, this is their 8th attempt to redo it, to see if what they can get away with is what's going on. Wow. And a lot of people don't understand that the Hobby Lobby decision affected, corporations, but only for-profit corporations. All the nonprofits. So, I mean, there's a lot of people don't know the details of this, but this Obamacare HHS mandate, which requires you, if you employ people, to provide these abortifacients. Well, your church is exempt, but not your church school.
Right.
Not your seminary, not your Christian college, not any ministry you listen to on the radio that's a Christian nonprofit. They're not exempt. So, I mean, think about that. They're ordering Point of View to provide abortifacients to their employees. They're ordering the Little Sisters of the Poor, a bunch of nuns, to provide abortion-causing drugs to the other nuns. Well, they're not going to do it. And this is why we have, tons of clients all over the country that we're having to file lawsuits on this, and there's nothing at the Supreme Court yet.
Yes.
So this accommodation, what did it change? And this just shows you how bizarre what they're doing is.
Okay, this is going to make you laugh.
Yeah,
so, there's a punchline to this.
The requirement of this before was that if you objected religiously, you had to fill out a form that you sent to the government to say that you objected. And then they would sort of shift the shells around and say that you're not paying, that the insurance company that you're paying is paying, but you're not paying. Well, you're
still paying for
everybody of conscience, the Catholic Church, everybody says, you're asking me to put a process in place to provide this for my employees. I'm not going to do it. Well, the change that they made in this accommodation was they said, okay, no longer are we going to require you as a religious organization to provide a form. Now, what we want you to do is send us a letter that has all the information that's in the form. That was the change. That was the great accommodation they made. I mean, and I'm not exagerating. That's exactly what it says.
It is. Yeah. You don't have to fill out a form, but you have to send the same information in a letter.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to
government bureaucrats,
even understand what they think that gets them, but I think they think that gets them, that really gets the religious groups in a box or something, and it doesn't. They've lost, not only are these cases being lost around the country, but 2 cases made it to the Supreme Court on emergencies, the Little Sisters of the Poor and the Wheaton, Illinois, and in both of those cases, the Supreme Court is clearly saying that this accommodation is not enough, and that's why they keep tinkering with it to see what they can do to get away with what they're trying to do.
Because there are lots of cases in the pike. You have some of them, don't you?
Yeah. We have a myriad of these cases, and they're going to be thousands. I mean, if you think of how many church schools, how many Christian colleges, how many seminaries, how many Christian ministries there are across the country that are nonprofits. I mean, that's a huge number, and they're all going to be in a conscience situation, and so there's going to be a lot of these lawsuits until it gets decided.
You know what's funny about this, because it sort of ties together another story that we had planned on covering today. But, in the government's argument about Hobby Lobby in that case, there was all this controversy about whether a corporation was a person or could be considered a person or not in that case. And, of course, the government opposed that idea. But going back to now, the idea that that Burger King is going to be moving for financial reasons. They've acquired a Canadian company. They're going to have their headquarters, I guess, in Canada. And for tax reasons, it will save them a lot of money. Their shareholders are happy. But, oh, no, you can't do this because you wouldn't be a patriotic corporation. Well, if a corporation can be patriotic, they must be a person.
Yeah.
So it's just funny. And Charles Krauthammer, in his piece on this whole tax rate issue, he brought that up, and it's kind of funny to think about it in that light.
And it's not just what Penna talks about is not just a clever, hey, that's an interesting, that's an interesting response to what their argument was. No, this is the administration. They made this argument in the Supreme Court that corporations don't have religious freedom. They're not people. They and yet their quote, the quote that Krauthammer is talking about in his article is a quote, regarding the administration where they are the ones who essentially say that, the corporation needs to be more patriotic. And so, all of a sudden they're a person again when it's convenient. So it's interesting. But the reality to that is we shouldn't have the second highest, or the second highest or the highest. We're highest.
Now
we shouldn't have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. We're saying anybody who wants to put their corporation here is foolish. And if we want to bring all this money and resources back to this country, then we lower our corporate tax rate, as every other country, even the most liberal countries around the world, have done, because they see the economic, the situation where people are being encouraged to go other places.
Sure. And
Burger King's just yet another example. There's no telling how many, if we just simply had a corporate tax rate that was equal with everybody else around the world, there's no telling how much, how many trillions of dollars would come back into the United States.
Just think about this for a minute. This year, you went to Europe, I went to Hungary, which has perhaps one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. You've been to Ireland, which again has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. Those are two countries that are not suffering. When you think of Hungary especially, this was a country behind the Iron Curtain that now says, wait a minute, and all the countries near that, Slovenia, Romania, Slovakia, they all have a much lower corporate tax rate than America. And these were countries that just a few years ago were behind the Iron Curtain, were part of the Soviet bloc. But now they're doing a lot better because they recognize they don't want to chase corporations out of their country into another country.
Right. It's basic. I think everybody, if you have offices in Canada and the United States, name any other country, why wouldn't you have your official headquarters in whatever the other country is when you're going to save, 10%, 20%? And these are, a lot of these companies are they're billions of dollars. Multiply that times 10% and it's a lot of money that you're saving, and people are going to do that. That's what's going to happen. So we ought to know that, and we ought to change it. And I think there really is enough people to change it. If it would simply be a priority, there's enough Democrats and Republicans that know this is something that has to be done.
So the federal response to this sale of corporation, these inversions that are done in the best interest of the companies, is to outlaw it, to outlaw selling your company or relocating for tax reasons. They want to outlaw it. But as Kelly said, reforming the system now, lowering the tax rate, is actually popular right now on both sides of the aisle. It would be an opportune moment to do that.
I would think so. The last article that we've posted there is this Charles Krauthammer piece, in case you wanted to read it, an answer to corporate inversion. And there's one other benefit that we've talked about on this program as well, and that is that we have not just a few billion, we have billions and billions of dollars overseas that are in holding companies for U.S. corporations, but they're not going to bring it back at the current tax rate. So even some of the progressives in Congress are saying maybe we could just have a one-time sort of open-ended opportunity for you to repatriate the money, because what that essentially would be doing is giving you a stimulus package that would really stimulate the economy. Imagine that money all of a sudden comes back in the United States and is used by those corporations to build infrastructure, to develop all the kinds of things that would be necessary. If you want to turn the economy around, that would be another tremendous benefit from changing the corporate tax rate. But we'll leave that for another debate, or if you want to get to it a little bit later, we will certainly do that. But when we come back, we want to talk about ISIS. We want to talk about some of the challenges before this country. And we've posted a very good piece on reasons ISIS is more dangerous than Al-Qaeda. We'll give you a couple of facts and figures, starting with what's the difference between ISIS and ISIL. We'll explain that and much more right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford with us today. We're going to talk about ISIS for just a minute. Hear a little bit from the president's press conference, and then a couple of articles we've posted. One, 11 reasons why ISIS might be more dangerous than Al-Qaeda. Also, an article we've posted here about the United Kingdom, UK, raises the threat level to severe. They're very concerned. Couple of basic facts. First of all, ISIS stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. That's where you get the words ISIS, ISIS. But you will oftentimes hear the president and some others talk about it as ISIL. And that's because many people use the phrase Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. Now, that, I think, illustrates a little bit of the president's Muslim background, because Muslims talk about Levant. You might say, well, what is that? Well, that's always been the English term that was used for this region of the world, and the Muslim world has picked it up. So that would be the region of Syria and Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, to mention just a few countries. So that's where this idea of Levant came from. It was used by the British, and then it was picked up by that. So that is certainly the case. How powerful is it? Penna, last week we were on the program. We talked about George Packer at New Yorker estimates that ISIS controls 35,000 square miles of land. This includes the newly acquired towns in the Syrian-Turkey border, all the way down to some of the farming towns south of Baghdad. And it controls, as they concluded, now a volume of resources and territory unmatched in the history of extremist organizations. How wealthy is it? Well, last week we talked about just one CNN report where they were getting $2 million a day from the oil fields, but I went and looked a little bit more, and there was a very good piece this week by Jack Keane and Danielle Pletka in Wall Street Journal, and they figure that it may now be the richest terror group in the world. They have built a war chest, they estimate, of hundreds of millions of dollars. And then the big question is ISIS just in the Middle East? Well, we've seen these pictures of ISIS with a flag over, superimposed on the White House, or a picture of ISIS is here in Ferguson, Missouri, and certainly those in the British Empire are concerned about it. So that's just a little bit of background about ISIS. Let's go around the table, and then we'll hear what the president had to say.
Well, I love the comparison, because you mentioned Britain, and they're very worried about people from England being radicalized and joining this group, and a lot have. So Cameron comes back from his vacation. Obama goes back to his vacation. It's a big contrast there of how seriously this is being taken by these leaders. And I thought it was very interesting that one of the retired generals that speaks on Fox, Thomas McInerney, says, I believe we should go to DEFCON 1 and prepare for another attack. The situation is that serious. They're worried about what could happen, not only over in the Middle East, but also in Europe and in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could talk about on this. I know we're going to play the president's comments. The contrast with David Cameron and what the president said, I think, is just it's embarrassing. I mean, we've got a president who is really out of his depth, and he's been showing that on foreign policy in a lot of ways. But to come out like he did yesterday, and to basically, everybody's dependent upon us, right? And then for our leader to come out and say, well, we don't really have a plan.
We're going to hear him say that in just a minute. I'll let you hear
that's ridiculous. Now, the other part of this, though, that I think is interesting is, I mean, anybody who saw what happened, yesterday with, ISIS taking the 160 Syrian soldiers and stripping them down in their underwear and marching them into the desert and then killing all of them. Those are Muslims that they killed. And where this is happening right now is really, you've got an incredibly brutal, evil group that is, decapitating children and all the things that they're doing. Well, but they're doing it to the Muslims that are right around them too. And so you would think that they would do something, but they're not doing anything, which is really ridiculous. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to take care of a problem before it comes to our shores and arrives here. So, I mean, we have a real responsibility and to act quickly. And again, the president saying what he said yesterday, and then going to fundraisers and some Hollywood wedding. I mean, it's just really a bad idea.
I want to pick up on something Penna said just in passing before we hear from the president about the number that our British citizens are actually becoming radicalized. This comes from our good friend Gary Bauer, and he found this the other day. The British government estimates there are approximately 600 Muslims serving God and country in uniform, while it estimates that 800 British Muslims have left the country to actually wage jihad in Iraq and Syria. Now, if you look at Khalid Mahmoud, who is a member of the British Parliament, he believes the latter figure is closer to 1,500. He says if Mahmoud is correct, that means nearly 3 times as many British Muslims are fighting against England and its values than for England and its values. Is that kind of scary to recognize? And that's, of course, why David Cameron has been paying so much attention to this. He's seen this play out in his own country. Let's hear from the president. This were a couple of comments from his press conference, and I'll give you a chance to maybe comment after the first 3, and then we have 6 in all. But the first one is obviously where President Obama says that he will always protect America.
In Iraq, our dedicated pilots and crews continue to carry out the targeted strikes that I authorized to protect Americans there and to address the humanitarian situation on the ground. As Commander-in-Chief, I will always do what is necessary to protect the American people and defend against evolving threats to our homeland.
Then President Obama went on to say that he is, of course, Commander-in-Chief, and he has the authority to carry out bombings.
I am confident that as Commander-in-Chief, I have the authorities to engage in the acts that we are conducting currently. As our strategy develops, we will continue to consult with Congress, and I do think that it'll be important for Congress to weigh in.
And then one more, and this is the one that Kelly was referring to just a minute ago, in which the president admits that we don't have a strategy.
But I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet.
I was just thinking, Kelly, you and I have to report to boards every once in a while. I think you're going to get to do that in about a week, and I have one coming up as well. And I can imagine if somebody says, what's your strategy for fundraising? I say, I don't have a strategy. You know what they're going to say to me? Well, you better find one pretty quickly. Yes. Commander-in-Chief at least admits at this point, we really don't have a strategy on how to deal with ISIS, especially how to go into Syria. That's a concern.
It's a big concern. It's certainly not something that you go public and talk about. I mean, you should be embarrassed if you don't. He's got plenty of people that have expertise. But, we've seen this. I mean, the problem is the politicization of everything with this administration. I mean, we saw, different military leaders, American military leaders speak out and then seem to be pulled back. We saw, the Hagel, do the same thing. And, they flipped from ISIS being, a serious threat to being, quote, JV, to being, just all over the map. And it's, again, you add that with Putin and what's going on there. And I mean, we're just not respected right now. And it's because our leader is not respected, because you can't believe what he says. Even if he talks tough, which he hadn't done yet on this, it still is not something that's believable, which Putin is showing dramatically right now. And this is a very dangerous thing. I mean, people say, it's politics. I care less about the politics. I care about what's going to happen in the world, because we're seen as, we're kind of the policemen a lot of times of keeping everything, people acting right, and we're just not there right now. So all kinds of things could begin to break out, as we're seeing with ISIS, as we're seeing with Russia and the Ukraine, and there's a lot of other places that the same type of things could begin to happen.
It would be nice and encouraging to think that this president is speaking one way, but actually they're amassing a strong response in the background secretly. But I don't feel that way, because that's not been the way he's acted. And I would really love to know, in a sense, where he's coming from on his foreign policy, because I know that he felt he had to do some bombing, and that was a good thing to do there in Iraq to, free some people and de-strengthen or weaken ISIS. But some other things have to be done. And I just, some people will say this president doesn't care at all about our strength. He wants to weaken America in the world, because that's his philosophy as a foreign policy, is for us to be weak. Is that really true? If it is, I think that Congress will take a huge bath in the next, the Democrats will take a bath in the next elections. So, even because an election is coming, he may have to do something politically. And that would be a good thing. I don't get him. I wish I could get more of a read on him. At least we know that Jimmy Carter, who's gone to speak to Hamas, is actually our enemy when it comes to foreign policy. President Obama speaks out of so many sides of his mouth. It's very confusing.
It's confusing if you even pay attention to his administration, because you have Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, who is, really saying we are at a major crisis. You even have the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, being referred to as a war hawk by Rand Paul. I mean, who would have saw that one coming? Yeah. So, I mean, it's right now, it's kind of need to get everybody saying the same thing in the administration, at least, and we're not even getting that. Let's take a break, though. Perhaps you have some comments. We have much more to say about the president's press conference, and also why ISIS is more dangerous than Al-Qaeda. That coming up right after this.
As the list of wedding vendors losing their rights to do business unless they agree to serve same-sex couples gets longer, their stories are just getting sadder. In addition to wedding photographers, flower shops, and bakeries, we can now add to the list of victims of this bureaucratic bullying, believe it or not, an actual bridal boutique. Victoria Miller owns WW Bridal Boutique in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. She politely declined when a lesbian couple asked for an appointment to shop for wedding gowns for themselves and, get this, bridesmaids' dresses for their cross-dressing groomsmen. Victoria explained that her store doesn't service same-sex weddings. She stated that providing these girls dresses for a sanctified marriage would break God's law. The lesbian couple then began a campaign of retaliation, and now the Bloomsburg Town Council is considering passing a law that could be used to sue WW Bridal and other businesses whose God-fearing owners refuse to lend their skills and creativity to same-sex weddings and commitment celebrations. It's surreal to think a bridal shop could be put out of business for refusing to participate in the complete redefinition and deconstruction of marriage. WW Bridal is facing the possibility of having to close their shop in a state that hasn't even legalized same-sex marriage. The state of New York has legal same-sex marriage. From there, we now have this heart-rending case. The Gifford family in upstate New York has operated Liberty Ridge Farm for over 25 years. The farm is their home. They live on the second and third floors of the barn, and they open the farm to the public for events like berry picking, fall festivals, pig racing, parties, and also weddings and receptions. When the Giffords book a wedding, it's not just about opening up the barn for the ceremony and or reception. They greet the guests and take them from where they park to the barn in their farm trolley. They decorate and set up the floral arrangements, provide catering, and even arrange fireworks displays. The Giffords take extra special care in providing special services to couples because they are Christians. When Melissa Irwin and Jenny McCarthy attempted to book the farm for their wedding ceremony and reception, the Giffords declined their request. Cynthia Gifford told them she and her husband Robert could not in good conscience hold a same-sex wedding ceremony in their home. The lesbian couple, now married, brought an unlawful discrimination suit against the Giffords. A judge with the New York Human Rights Commission ruled against the Giffords, forcing them to pay a $1,500 mental anguish fine to each of the women and a $10,000 civil fine to New York State. Plus, the Giffords must implement so-called anti-discrimination procedures, including posters posted prominently. They have to provide their staff with training, re-education, if you will, in non-discrimination. Believing Saint, this is really happening, and it's tyranny. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. It is our weekend edition. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go back to just a few other comments by the president. He made a real comment that ISIS or ISIL is going to be difficult, and we're not going to solve this problem easily.
Rooting out a cancer like ISIL will not be quick or easy, but I'm confident that we can and we will, working closely with our allies and our partners.
Then he talked about the role of the military and his confidence in them.
Our military is the best in the world. We can rout ISIS on the ground and keep a lid on things temporarily, but then as soon as we leave, the same problems come back again. So we've got to make sure that Iraqis understand, in the end, they're going to be responsible for their own security, and part of that is going to be the capacity for them to make compromises.
And finally, he talked a little bit about those regional partners that need to be part of this.
Any successful strategy, though, also needs strong regional partners. I'm encouraged so far that countries in the region, countries that don't always agree on many things, increasingly recognize the primacy of the threat that ISIL poses to all of them.
So again, love to get some comments around the table. Penna, one that comes to mind is he was talking about, if we solve the problem, but then we leave, well, the problem resurfaces. And I understand why we don't want to leave. I understand why sometimes we do want to leave, but let's just keep in mind, we still have American troops in South Korea. We have American troops in Germany. We have troops all over the world. And so when we say, but we've got to pull them all out of Iraq, or we've got to pull them all out of wherever, fill in the blank, Afghanistan, isn't that part of the problem?
Yeah, I can't believe he can say it with a straight face. He assumes that we have to pull everyone out as soon as we've had some sort of action in a country. That's what he did in Iraq. I don't think we'd be here if he hadn't done that. If he had left a force, if we'd had a status of forces agreement there, if we had people, yes, he says the Iraqis are responsible for their own security. Well, they need a little bit of our help. And, this time, if we help them, and if we get rid of ISIS, which we really should do, we should completely get rid of them. We should use this best military in the world that President Obama is talking about. And, yes, get some help from other European allies and Middle Eastern allies. Saudi Arabia should help right now. They're at risk. And go in and wipe them out of Syria and Iraq. We should do it. And then we should figure out how we're going to remain influential there.
Yeah, there's just a part of it that, I agreed with a number of things he said there, but there's a part of it that it reminds me of dramatic irony, like when you're reading a play and somebody is saying something and you're like watching them and going, they don't understand what they just said. That's kind of what I felt like then, It's like he's talking about pulling out and what that means and all. He's kind of, it's like he's indicting himself without realizing it. That if he had followed what the military had originally wanted to do with how we move out, you don't announce dates you're leaving, you don't, all the things he did, which allowed the other side to go, okay, let's get everything ready, and then when he's gone, we'll start, working on the takeover. But he is right that we need to be working with the Kurds. We need to be working with, local people who eventually need to be able to handle these folks. And that's going to be a part of the process. But I'm kind of with Penna a little earlier. My first thought was, okay, what would I do if I was president? Well, I would be sending troops in to just wipe these folks out, because it's an evil that is growing greatly. It is incredibly powerful. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of land. This could be, cause incredible havoc all through the world. And there's no, you're not going to find anybody as evil as this with what they've been doing. But I wouldn't do it by announcing it. Yeah. I would do it. The announcement would be when they realized it was happening. So one of the things I would really say, and we always know this, and everybody who's a believer knows this, that we're called to pray for our leaders, for our president, our Supreme Court, our legislature. We really need to pray. I'm sure a lot of people are praying for Christians, for instance, over there, and we need to be doing that. What they've been going through is just, you can't even imagine. Mm-hmm. But we need to be praying for President Obama. Even a broken clock reads right twice a day. Well, God can make him read right on this, and we need to pray that God will give him wisdom to do something that, because otherwise this could be really, really bad. It's already bad. We've got the UK essentially saying that this is like the highest level of threat, and so that tells you something about how dangerous this is getting, and it's something that needs to be handled correctly.
Well, again, there are some ways we can help the existing boots on the ground, the Peshmerga and things of that nature. We've actually posted some things about that. But just before we take a break, Penna, let's talk about this other article we've posted here, 11 Reasons Why ISIS Might Be More Dangerous Than Al-Qaeda. Comes from our good friends at the Daily Signal and Heritage. And this is another issue because some people have called into this program and say, oh, we're just war weary. We don't want to send any more troops. And I think we've actually posted some things by Max Boot and others showing that we don't really have to deploy lots of troops, but we do have to support those who are in this fight and maybe provide air cover. But at the same time, we need to come back to the reality that this is a group, a radical group, as some have said in some of their more recent statements, that ISIS now controls a volume of resources and territory unmatched in the history of extremist organizations. I don't think the mainstream press has really driven home how incredibly powerful this particular group might be.
Yeah, they've had an interesting strategy, and they're much more sophisticated than Al-Qaeda, and that's the comparison that Heritage Foundation makes there. They've gone through and they've amassed weaponry that was European and Western American weaponry. They've looted the banks where they've conquered things, so they've got money. They've kidnapped people, got ransom, and the oil money that you mentioned earlier. So they're rich. Also, Heritage says they're more media sophisticated than Al-Qaeda, and they excel in using social media as a tool of terrorism. And they post Twitter and YouTube postings in English, which shows that the West is their audience, and they're recruiting from the West. And then they're flush with cash, as we've said. They also, many Al-Qaeda-linked groups are now moving over to ISIS. They're pledging allegiance to their leader. And then they control some territory right in the heart, a lot of territory now, as you said, right in the heart of the Arab world. That gives them sort of a launching pad to try to get this caliphate, which they've said this is their goal. That they're going to conquer all these lands, and then they say they want to conquer the United States too. I mean, there's more here.
Well, again, just so many examples that we have, and in that article, I think as people read through that or some of the other things that we've written, just to remind ourselves that we are facing a major challenge. I know right now most Americans say we don't want to send any more troops to Iraq and Afghanistan, but military advisors are there. We've already been involved in bombing missions. And I think it's, as Beck Kelly was saying just a minute ago, it's time to pray for the president. He says, I don't have a strategy. Okay, let's hope that we, by the end of Labor Day weekend, have some military advisors meeting with the president, and they have a strategy. Seems like that's the next step.
That would be a good prayer.
Yeah, it would certainly be a good one.
Of course, he'll have to leave. He can't be at weddings and he can't be at fundraisers and be meeting with. Course. That's right, and that's his current plans for this weekend. Unbelievably, coming back from vacation to this crisis, to the beheading of a journalist, and as he comes back to this crisis, and David Cameron came back from his vacation and he addressed the issue. We saw his statement today, and again, it's just baffling. President Obama would come back from all this vacation and 9 days on the golf course and leave for fundraising and for a glitzy wedding instead of staying, meeting with the Joint Chiefs and really hammering out a strategy that is announced. Or again, if they don't want to announce it, I'm fine with that as long as it starts behind the scenes.
Well, we'll take your calls, 1-800-351-1212 in the second hour. But, a couple weeks ago, we said happy birthday to Phyllis Schlafly, and I'm looking at a birthday girl. And so Penna Dexter's birthday's next week. By the way, Rob and our staff and Chris as well. So how about happy birthday to Penna?
Happy birthday!
All right.
We sing happy birthday to you. And may all your dreams come true. Happy, happy birthday.
Okay, well, we had a little bit of fun. We did
Thank
that
you.
for Phyllis Schlafly, and I thought, I cannot let this go because I know it's your birthday on Labor Day, I guess it is. So
It was Labor Day for my mother. I was actually born on Labor Day.
So that is it. Anyway, lots of great opportunities, and we'll continue our conversation in the second hour. We see some calls coming in. You can wish Penna a happy birthday if you would like, and you can do that on Facebook, and we certainly also encourage you to go to our Facebook page, find a little bit more, as well as maybe download the podcast in case you didn't have a chance to hear everything we've talked about. We will take your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212, right after these important messages.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. And let's go to, we'll start in South Carolina, WAGB. And Gail, thank you for calling today. Are you there, Gail? I will put Gail on hold, and I will go to Tony in Georgia. We'll see if we can get Gail back here. Tony, what would you like to share with us today?
Well, I appreciate you taking my call once again, Kerby, and happy birthday, Hannah.
Thank you. It's Penna.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Penna.
That's okay. Thank you for the greeting.
Uh-huh. But anyway, Kerby, it's just that, I think personally it's just that with a lot of things that Obama is not doing, and we've seen him from the time he's been in office, he's definitely not on our side. Let's just cut that to the chase on that. And because when he swore the oath twice, and with all this inactive stuff, and he sit there and say, well, certain things that he feels like he's seen or missed out on, or we'll say seen, most of his say, well, I saw the news like you did. All the money that we pay these people to surround them with people to keep him informed about what's going on the globe, and for him to say what he said last night about us not being prepared to take those people on, and they've known about this for the longest. We just simply cannot trust them. Why can't we recall this president?
Well, it's not going to happen, but this has been disturbing, I think, for a lot of us around the table. To maybe misread your enemy is one of the great dangers. To refer to, as Kelly mentioned a minute ago, that ISIS was the junior varsity. Somebody played junior varsity basketball for a few weeks. I took that as an offense, but nevertheless, back to the bigger issue. This is not a junior varsity group, and I don't think most Americans yet understand the gravity of the situation. Here was at a press conference, Penna, an opportunity for him to educate the American people. This ISIS has land that's at least the size of Maryland, which means that they actually occupy more land and have more control than the nation of Israel, that they actually occupy more land now than the leader in Syria, and that they have more money than any radical group in the history of extremist organizations. That's the kind of education that needs to take place, where you rally the people behind the policy that you want to implement.
Well, if you do that, then people demand action. So rather than being war weary, which is what they're claiming, the American people are war weary. Well, we're war weary until we're told that there's a necessity for our armed forces to be used. And so when you have a president up there who doesn't do what you said, which is articulate the problem, then they're war weary because they don't see a good reason to use our forces. But there are good reasons, and it's leadership that convinces the public of the necessity to do something.
Yeah, we need to be in prayer. This is a serious deal. And again, I think originally most Americans, especially probably most Christian Americans, saw what they were doing to Christians and was appalled, but it was somewhere else. Again, it's beyond that. It's way beyond that. It's not a little group in a city. It's something holding the size of one of our states and having oil and gas production, so they got lots of money. This is one of the most cruel, evil groups you've ever seen. Again, the video this isn't a video that somebody surreptitiously caught yesterday. They videoed, because they were so proud, the 160 soldiers that they captured, and then made them strip to their underwear and then forced them to march in the desert and then killed all of them and put it all on video. And that's actually one of the more civilized things they've done. I mean, not the beheading of children and all the other things, the raping of women and everything else that's been going on. This is a really evil and very quickly powerful group that needs to be addressed. And, we need to do what we need to do to get control of this. And there are a lot of people in that area that need to learn how to get control of this, or they're going to have problems in the future. But we can certainly provide a lot of support for that if we're willing. And as at this point, we haven't.
Let's go back to the phones. Mark in Texas, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, Kirby, I appreciate you taking the call. I've been listening to y'all for quite some time, mainly while I'm driving home to work from work. My question was, I got a briefing from a retired brigadier general at a Veterans Day dinner we had one year, and he brought right out of the jihadist website that they're basing their war on 100 years. They figure in 100 years they can take over the world. And, the sphere of influence at that time was mainly around the equator. Malaysia, some small pockets a little bit north of the equator and things like that. But, they still got 60-something years. They're planning on battling the infidels. And, I'm not hearing, any more of that. And it came right off their website, as far as we were told in the briefing. And now you can see that it's coming true. They got influences in South America. They got influences in Russia, Kazakhstan, and all these other places. They're spreading north and south of the equator. And we need to get into the mindset, I think, in America that, heaven forbid any of our youngsters get killed. I spent 20-plus years in the military and went to all kinds of things. I spent a lot of years in the Middle East. But we need to take what they say as fact. And it looks to me like it's coming of fruition, even in this day and age with this new ISIS.
Well, Let me jump in real quickly, because what you're saying is what the jihadists were saying, but this is also what the West has been saying for some time. Samuel Huntington was a professor at Harvard University. I had an opportunity one time to share a platform with him, and he wrote a book called The Clash of Civilizations. And he was writing back as the Berlin Wall was falling and the Soviet Union was crumbling. There were people writing books, you might remember, the end of history, and we're no longer going to have any clashes. We're going to come into a time of peace. There were people saying we haven't had to fight a war with any country that has a McDonald's restaurant in that country. And so there's just this great optimism. And he wrote a book on the clash of civilizations, and he talked about one of the biggest, if not the biggest clash, would be a clash between the West and radical Islam. By that, he didn't mean that all Muslims are radical, but he did mean that radical Islam would be the greatest challenge to the West. And he is right. And there has been this idea on the part of the radicals that they want to reestablish this caliphate that existed under the Ottoman Empire, and they want to rule the world with Sharia law. And Penna, if that's the mindset of both ISIS and Hamas and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda, they may have different strategies, but the goal is always the same.
Yeah, and we need to take their statements seriously. They're not blowing smoke. I mean, we've already gone through this once. And even on our own homeland, we had the atrocities of 9/11. And I don't know, it seems like in the mind of this administration, that is just never happened.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll give so many more of you a chance to join our opportunity to join us by phone, because we have lots of phone calls here today. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. If you'd like to read a little bit more, we have, of course, some of the religious liberty articles on the website. But the second article there, one we found very helpful. Penna, thank you for bringing it to our attention. 11 reasons why ISIS might be more dangerous than Al-Qaeda. I've also written some things on this. Matter of fact, my Tuesday commentary, which will be coming out, deals with that as well. And this is perhaps a game changer. I'd like to get your comments, and we'll give you that opportunity. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, a majority of Americans have cell phones, and we're just now beginning to see the impact they're having on our lives. They can be powerful tools, but they can also be significant distractions. I'm sure all of us have noticed people with a cell phone sometimes seem distracted, and after they answer a text or an email, they seem to spend a few minutes trying to recollect their thoughts before they have the interruption. An article in Newsweek magazine documents what many of us have already suspected. There are two major drawbacks to these devices. The first is distraction overload. A study at the University of Illinois found that if an interruption takes place at a natural breakpoint, then the mental disruption is less. If it came at a less opportune time, the user experiences the "where was I?" brain lock. A study at George Mason University found that if the distraction came during a checklist, it was easy to miss an item. Sadly, an airline crash in Madrid a few years ago was attributed to a mistake by a pilot from an interruption-induced error. A second problem is what is called continuous partial attention. Cell phone users like to use their devices while they should be paying attention to something else. Psychologists tell us that we really aren't multitasking, but rather engaging in rapid-fire switching of attention among tasks. It is inevitable that they're going to miss key information if part of their focus is on their cell phone. But another hidden drawback associated is less creativity. Looking at your cell phone while you're doing nothing replaces what we used to do in previous decades. Back then we called it daydreaming. That is when your brain often connects unrelated facts and thoughts. You've probably had some of your most creative ideas while shaving, putting on makeup, or driving. That is when your brain can be creative. Checking email reduces daydreaming. You know, cell phones are here to stay and are powerful tools, but we also need to know the strengths and weaknesses of the technology. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. Let's go to Louisiana. Amar, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, I just want to say something real fast and then I'll hang up. I really believe, personally, I'm originally from the Middle East, believe
You're on. Go
that
ahead.
ISIS are the United States is overestimating their power. Same like when we went to Iraq. I remember the news was saying how many tanks Saddam got, how much military equipment he got, how many soldiers he got, how many this, how many that, and they acted like it's going to be a war, like the end of the wars, and find out we got in there in less than a day. So I think the U.S. need to get out of being the policeman of the world and let the Arabs or the Muslims deal with ISIS. I think ISIS have a lot of people who are poor and misguided, and they'll always find people to go and join them. I think just killing ISIS is not going to stop that kind of mentality, that religious radicalism that is going all over the world, especially in the
Where are
Middle
you
East.
from?
I'm from Egypt.
So how? What if you lived in, say, Syria right now, or in parts of Iraq? I mean, would you be fearful? Would you be afraid?
Of course, I would be afraid. But I'm saying the U.S. doesn't need to be involved. This is a radical mentality that the Middle East have to deal with it. By going and killing ISIS, you are creating another ISIS. It's the same thing like we did with Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. It didn't kill Al Qaeda; it generated more terrorist organization than it killed more.
But do you think if we'd done it differently and kept a force in Iraq, and if we were not signaling that we were going to leave Afghanistan, do you think that would be? Is there anything such thing as a deterrent to their growth, or is that
because the ISIS were generated even when we were in Iraq? I mean, it started with I forgot the name of the guy who got killed. He was slaughtering people too, and he was part of Al Qaeda. And we killed this guy. And guess what? Now
you mean Osama bin Laden?
Not Osama bin Laden. I'm talking about Al-Zawahiri, or I forgot his name. He was. What's that?
Yeah, well, and the bottom line is what you're making the case for. I think we get it. Is that if we go in and take out one group, another one springs up. It's kind of the whack-a-mole problem. But it does seem to me that I will disagree in the fact that some pretty smart people that have access to a lot of data are saying that this is a much more dangerous group indeed. And I certainly recognize the impact that it's having before. Even under Saddam Hussein, at least you had Christians in there. And Kelly, you talked about that just a minute ago. And we are basically engaging, and allowing, ISIS is probably a better way to say it, engaging in ethnic cleansing. I mean, there are places where Christians have existed for millennia, and they've been completely rooted out.
Yeah, I mean, it's genocide.
Yeah,
and in a way, it's not just genocide, but genocide in a way that you probably haven't seen since, I don't know. You think of just really the most barbaric regimes in the last 1,000 or 2,000 years. It's I think of this. I think all the way back to the Assyrians and that kind of evil activity. So yeah, it's. I mean, to be honest, America, if they were seeing this going on anywhere in the world, there'd be a temptation to do something to help. But especially in this situation, and I think even just a lot of times you can just take out the power of them by taking out pinpointed things. For instance, how about taking the money, right, and the oil, where they don't have the ability to buy this sophisticated equipment and all the things that they're buying. Because you think when you go into a war, a lot of times the first thing you do is cut out their supply lines and cut out their communications, and so there might be very good things we could do again. And the Amar is right to an extent that the people there locally need to be doing something. The problem is they're not. And that's going to be the quandary for us. Now, again, what should the president be doing? What should our country be doing? There should be phone calls going on right now to all these countries around there where we should be building a coalition so that the people who are closest to this evil are equipped to take care of it, and we are doing our part. But right now, it almost looks like if we don't do anything, nobody's going to do anything.
Well, again, looting banks, including the central bank in Mosul, and taking over equipment that was left behind when we walked out of there. I mean, you can talk about it, and we've sometimes backed the wrong ones. I mean, we were sort of backing the Mujahideen when Russia came into Afghanistan, and then later we're fighting the Taliban, essentially the same people. So I understand some of what Amar is saying, but again, I reject the idea that this is a small, insignificant group. The president called it junior varsity. I don't think he's going to be calling it that.
Well, it's growing.
Yeah.
It's growing.
And the money and the resources and just the sheer volume of land that they control now is making them a major player in the world stage. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about that. Let's take another phone call and see what you say. Oklahoma, Brian, what would you share with us today?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I want to say, first of all, with respect to the last caller, I don't care what country it's in, what capabilities they have to take care of their own people. If women and children are getting beheaded, then women and children are getting beheaded. And you go in and you stop it. You don't. If they're going to stop it, they would have already stopped it before then. So I don't think it's a question of can they and will they do something? It's okay. They've crossed the line. Go and stop what's going on. That's what needs to be the U.S.'s mindset. Secondly, having to do with Obama saying what he said about not being prepared, not having a strategy. If that video coming up of Mr. Foley getting brutally executed was not good in a lot of ways, but politically it was not good for Obama. And obviously, whether he cares about morally or not, he's gonna want people to look to him and to like him, and that's not happening right now, including myself. But if in that video they said this next American his life is paying on your next decision. If Barack Obama came out and said, "All right, my decision is we're going in and we're doing stuff," another video comes up, another execution. Everybody's gonna say that was on Obama. He should not have said a thing. If he's going out and saying, "I don't have a plan yet SEAL Team 6 is out there doing something right now," and they save that guy, then maybe he said that just to tell them over
Hope
the
you're right.
world,
Yeah.
I'm not, I have not made a decision, so don't kill him, Maybe they're frantically trying to find this guy before he goes out and says, "I've made my decision," because that's what they said. You make your decision, this guy live,
Could be, yeah. And Kelly pointed out the possibility that maybe behind the scenes there are some things happening, and it's probably better we don't know all the things behind the scenes. Penna, you and I over the years have had a chance to interview people like Steve Emerson and Frank Gaffney and others that have access to a lot more information, or in the past had access to a lot more information than we do. And we recognize it's probably better the American people don't know everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's hope.
We don't know everything the special forces are doing. Now, they did tell us that they tried to go in and save Foley.
Yes.
And when they got there was no one there.
Mm-hmm.
So, they did brag about that in a sense. And, we know they're working. We do know they are.
And again, that example, I think, is another one of those examples that just loses all confidence in the administration and the president. I mean, if you went in to try to rescue somebody and you failed, to reveal that information to sort of make yourself politically look like, hey, look, we tried, but you've now revealed something that puts in danger all kinds of sources and methods that were involved and make it more difficult for you to do that again. That's one of those sort of, hey, let's do this politically, even though it's going to cost us in lives and an ability to go in and in protecting, our special forces. So that's the kind of thing that, makes me go, I sure wish they were doing something behind the scenes, but I have a feeling if they were doing anything, they'd have to tell everybody about it. Yeah. Because that's been their MO with the political
Yeah, especially
world.
with elections in 2 months.
Yeah. Back to 3 words, SEAL Team 6. Remember that? When Joseph Biden said it was SEAL Team 6, and then later on they were killed in Afghanistan. I mean, there's some times when our parents used to hear a phrase, loose lips sink ships, right? That was during World War II. So that level of confidence is of concern as well. Last half hour, we're going to give you a chance to continue this conversation, and we will perhaps get into another topic or two, but we certainly have a full bank of phone calls, so we might as well spend some time continuing this ongoing discussion and debate about ISIS and about the Middle East, but there are certainly many other things taking place as well, so visit our website, pointofview.net, and as you go there, you can find a number of articles. Let me mention again, if you weren't with us in the first hour, we have the Religious Rights Kit that Kelly Shackelford has put together. Have some great information about religious liberty. You can also, of course, go to our Facebook page and find some of the facts and figures we're talking about, some of those articles. And if you click on that button that says donate, as we come to the end of August, it would be great to hear from you as well. If you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate it. We'll be back with your phone calls right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. It is our weekend edition. We might get into another topic in just a few minutes, but let's take a few more phone calls on this topic as we talk about ISIS and some of the threats. We'll go to North Carolina. Clemma, thank you for calling today.
Hi, this is Clemma, New Bern, North Carolina, and I would like a moment to express my point of view.
I would love to hear it.
Well, thank you. I retired as a flight attendant after 22 years with Delta Airlines, and I've seen a lot of the world, and I've newly embraced the Christian religion, and I so agree with the comment about praying for our president and praying for our country. And I really do. And I don't mean just like praying for him like, oh, well, just do what we want you to do and don't do what they want you to do, making it everything political. These are really important times. These are crucial times, as you said. I mean, evil is kind of overtaking. It's moving forward. And I remember watching TV not too long ago, and Syria was using chemical weapons on its children. They had this on TV. President Obama put a warship on the coast of Syria, and President Putin was here, and they closed the government. Someone in the House was reciting Dr. Seuss. 2 days, and the American people didn't want to go to war, which is understandable, and 2 days later, President Putin's on CNN saying, I'll take care of Syria. So what I'm trying to say, my point is that a house divided against itself cannot stand. We have to stand as people that mean good, that we have to stand, God is good, and we have to stand for the good, and we have to stand against evil. And I think it works like that, and we take these kind of, not cheap shots at everybody and everything, but these are important times, and we have to get into that place within ourselves that realizes that, and that we have to stand whole as a nation against a lot of the evil that's surrounding us. So that was my comment. And when we say pray for the president, pray for this country, really pray hard. This is important. People are being slaughtered. Evil, it's something like Nazi Germany. I'm not a politician or a history major, but it's out of control. These people supposedly have a lot of money. They're raiding banks, as you said. And this is serious. And we have to pray for serious thought and serious answers, serious plans, and effective plans, because it means a lot. It means lives. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for letting me comment.
Well, thank you for calling in. Hope you will do so again. These are serious times, and she mentioned Nazi Germany. You know, you never want to go to that because I think it's overdone. But there is something that I would like to talk about. After World War I, we were convinced, I think, in the West, that was the war to end all wars. And there was just a war-weary Europe and a war-weary America. And they did not take seriously the rise of Nazi Germany because, after all, we just can't imagine that it would happen again. And appeasement and all sorts of things were part of that. I'm not saying that we're in the same situation, but I am saying that there is a tendency sometimes for us to be weary of military conflict and thus to downplay the seriousness of a group like ISIS. And I think we have to take it more seriously. And as she said, it's a serious times. It requires serious prayer and contemplation.
I loved her encouragement to prayer. And, you know, we know from reading the Bible that war is always a possibility. There's been wars throughout history. The wars are never going to end until the Lord comes, until the Lord returns. And one of our ways of operating as a nation is to have a strong military. And if we know how to position that and how to use it, we can deter some war because we make people afraid of us. And that's been the problem. Number one, our rhetoric doesn't employ the strength we have effectively, so we don't deter some of these actions on the part of bad actors in the world. And number two, we are now allowing our military to be downgraded. We're cutting funding to the military. And when we do that, We should have learned in the last generation. We have to rebuild. We have to turn around and rebuild it again. We need to have a strong military. It needs to be at the ready, and then and then we have to ask for wisdom in how to use it. We cannot fight evil everywhere it pops up. We can't do it. So we have to pick our battles. And I think the case we're making today here is that ISIS is an evil that needs to be dealt with. It's not one that we can just allow to fester.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're seeing other countries certainly step up. We saw, David Cameron today. But, America hasn't stepped forward yet. In fact, we've done just the opposite. So we really need to pray that would change, and that we would not only step up but do the right thing, and that if God wills, that we could extinguish this, and that would be a great thing for the world and for a lot of people.
Let's take another phone call. We'll go to Georgia this time. Keith, thank you for calling today.
Hey, how you doing? Listen, I really appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you for calling.
There's a lot of us like me who are really ignorant to a lot of things out there, and you have really been helpful in keeping me informed in things. But listen, real quickly, I'm just curious about how deep this thing goes with ISIS and or jihad and the world war that they're trying to put upon the world. In Jessup, Georgia, there's a compound of about 1,800 acres that has been bought by Islamic group of some kind, another one in Conyers, and the talk around here is that these are things that are happening all over the United States, and that these are like little cell groups that when jihad finally does take place, at that time, these are going to, the things that are going over with the suicide bombings and all that are going on over in other countries are going to start happening here. When they start this out, and I just want to know: is there anything to this? Have you ever heard anything about what I'm talking about?
We've done programs on it. Yeah,
I wasn't sure. I listen to you a lot, but then I'm on the road a good bit, so I get to listen to you a lot. But then I probably missed that. I wondered if y'all had done programs on that.
There have been some people that have looked at some of those compounds. Now, first of all, these are not ISIS compounds, but they are Muslim compounds. And over the years, people have been able to smuggle out some videos, and they're concerning, to put it mildly. Now, I just went on our website. If you go to the This Week button, I typed in Muslim compounds, 29 stories popped up. In other words, we've done some of those stories in the past. You can watch the videos to yourself. As a matter of fact, a few have actually aired on some network televisions. Now, let's not overdo this, but there are a few of these where they actually go out into rural areas, and there are some individuals that seem to be of concern. And as we see those, that's something we should pay attention to, and hopefully Homeland Security is. Penna, you and I have also had the privilege over the years to interview people like Stephen Emerson and Frank Gaffney. Frank Gaffney was the Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. And they have actually been able to have individuals surreptitiously go into various mosques and hear some of the Friday messages. And their analysis is that maybe 2/3 of the messages that some of these individuals have heard in the mosque should concern Homeland Security. So again, I'm not painting with a broad brush, but I am saying that there are probably individuals in this country that mean us harm. Let's hope that Homeland Security takes them seriously and recognizes those could be potential hotspots and danger areas that we need to pay attention to.
There was a stepped-up vigilance for these types of groups around the country after 9/11, and I know there was a lot of rooting out of those types of radicals in our country.
True.
And, we don't hear much about it right now, so it makes me wonder. I mean, I you hear about, thank you, Keith, for mentioning those, because, with the way the administration conducts its foreign policy, is it conducting its domestic policy with regard to terrorism any better? I don't know.
Yeah, and again, if you're with the Homeland Security or the FBI, are you also hesitant because of political correctness? Because if I go in and prosecute or take someone out, would that be seen as anti-Islamic, Islamophobic or something like that? Kelly, you're smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah,
here.
when you think about, Fort Hood,
yeah,
right?
By the way, the killer just this last week we found out actually
sent a message to ISIS.
Yeah, he said, "I want to be a citizen in the new caliphate." Yes. So Nadel Hassan, who, can we now call this something other than workplace violence?
Evidently not. This is all connected. When the administration refuses to refer to this to what it is, that this is a jihadist extremist. Instead, it's workplace violence. That's just ridiculous. But when you won't call things what they are, it's hard for you to deal with them.
Yeah.
That's an example of exactly what we're talking about.
Well, if you haven't seen that, I guess we'll post up that as well. Nadel Hassan actually wrote a letter because he wants to be a citizen in this new ISIS caliphate, assuming he'll ever get out of prison. So, as you and I have said before, you cannot make this stuff up. We're going to take a break, take some more phone calls right after this.
As the list of wedding vendors losing their rights to do business unless they agree to serve same-sex couples gets longer, their stories are just getting sadder. In addition to wedding photographers, flower shops, and bakeries, we can now add to the list of victims of this bureaucratic bullying, believe it or not, an actual bridal boutique. Victoria Miller owns WW Bridal Boutique in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. She politely declined when a lesbian couple asked for an appointment to shop for wedding gowns for themselves and, get this, bridesmaids' dresses for their cross-dressing groomsmen. Victoria explained that her store doesn't service same-sex weddings. She stated that providing these girls dresses for a sanctified marriage would break God's law. The lesbian couple then began a campaign of retaliation. And now the Bloomberg Town Council is considering passing a law that could be used to sue WW Bridal and other businesses whose God-fearing owners refuse to lend their skills and creativity to same-sex weddings and commitment celebrations. It's surreal to think a bridal shop could be put out of business for refusing to participate in the complete redefinition and deconstruction of marriage. WW Bridal is facing the possibility of having to close their shop in a state that hasn't even legalized same-sex marriage. The state of New York has legal same-sex marriage. From there, we now have this heart-rending case. The Gifford family in upstate New York has operated Liberty Ridge Farm for over 25 years. The farm is their home. They live on the second and third floors of the barn, and they open the farm to the public for events like berry picking, fall festivals, pig racing, parties, and also weddings and receptions. When the Giffords book a wedding, it's not just about opening up the barn for the ceremony and/or reception. They greet the guests and take them from where they park to the barn in their farm trolley. They decorate and set up the floral arrangements, provide catering, and even arrange fireworks displays. The Giffords take extra special care in providing special services to couples because they are Christians. When Melissa Irwin and Jenny McCarthy attempted to book the farm for their wedding ceremony and reception, the Giffords declined their request. Cynthia Gifford told them she and her husband Robert could not in good conscience hold a same-sex wedding ceremony in their home. The lesbian couple, now married, brought an unlawful discrimination suit against the Giffords. A judge with the New York Human Rights Commission ruled against the Giffords, forcing them to pay a $1,500 mental anguish fine to each of the women and a $10,000 civil fine to New York State. Plus, the Giffords must implement so-called anti-discrimination procedures, including posters posted prominently. They have to provide their staff with training, re-education, if you will, in non-discrimination. Believing Saint, this is really happening, and it's tyranny. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and those of you that are listening online had a chance to hear Penna Dexter's commentary, and I thought just a minute we might focus on that because it is very important. We obviously air it twice on the program, and if you are not familiar with the commentaries that Penna does, you can go to our Point of View blog. It's in the lower right-hand corner there, and you can read it. It's entitled Bullying Wedding Vendors, but it has to do with a story that we talked about last week, Penna, but now that we have Kelly here, I just got to get his attention on this as well, because you have this family known as the Giffords. They own and operate Liberty Ridge Farm in upstate New York. They make this farm available for all sorts of things, and I've looked at some of that, berry picking and pig racing and fall festivals and sometimes even weddings. Well, as you might imagine, two lesbians decided to target them, and lo and behold, in this particular case, the Human Rights Commission in New York actually says you have to pay a $13,000 fine, $10,000 to the state, $1,500 of mental anguish fine to both lesbians. And we've always seen what's happened to, a baker in Colorado, a photographer in New Mexico, a florist in Washington. We can go on and on and on. This is their home. Talk about that if you might.
It's your right to do business, which we've been very worried about this threat. And of course, the same-sex marriage issue is the weapon that's being used. But, going beyond their business, this family actually lives there. It's their home. And now the state is saying that they have to allow same-sex weddings there. And actually, since they refused, they have to pay a $1,500 fine to each of the parts of the couple, this married couple, who, by the way, got married elsewhere. And they have to pay $10,000 to the state of New York as a fine. And the other awful part of it is they have to have re-education, this kind of training, sensitivity training we used to call it, for their employees, so that this type of anti-discriminatory activity will not take place again. And they have to post posters in their place of business. So, they're having a wedding and there's a poster about how you can't discriminate against homosexuals. So, these are Christian people. They cannot in good conscience do it. They can't. So I don't, whether they get bombarded with requests to do same-sex weddings and get put out of business by all the fines, or, what will happen to them, I don't know.
And again, I know that people that disagree with us, and I know there are people that do, they treat this like racism, okay? But I don't even remember in the 1960s when you had a racist or a segregationist that we told them that they had to go to re-education classes in the 1960s. So in some respects, this is far beyond anything we've ever seen before. And like I said before, this is their home. This wedding would have taken place on the first floor. They live on the second and third floor. I mean, we're not talking about your business where there's a disconnect, at least a little bit, between where you live and where you work. I mean, this is right there in your home. Kelly, this is, I think, another step further in terms of intrusion that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and it emphasizes, again, this just dramatic intolerance of the, GLBT activist. It's one thing to fight over a political position and win, okay? But then to say, now we want to make sure that no one expresses a thought that disagrees with us. That's just about as un-American as it comes, but that's what this is all about. Did they need to get married there? No. There's plenty of places for them. Is there a problem in New York with not having any place that won't marry, two women or two men? No, there's not a problem with that. But they are finding the people that have conscience or religious conscience objections and then trying to put the screws to them, which it just goes against everything this country is about. We allow people to have different beliefs in this country. We don't say, those beliefs we're not going to allow. We're going to crush you and destroy you. But it's just an incredibly intolerant mindset. It's going out of its way to look for trouble so they can try to force people to violate their religious conscience. And, it shouldn't be surprising to people that most people, their views of marriage are very much intertwined with their faith. Mm-hmm. They see it as a very religious and spiritual event. And so they should be allowed to have their beliefs on those without being destroyed.
Well, and the question I have is, this was the Human Rights Commission that brought this down. And we've seen right now the battle in Colorado. Boy, when they picked a fight with him, they did not know that the owner of Masterpiece Cakes was going to stand up and say, well, no, you're not going to make me do this. And it does seem to me that there's a bigger question to be thinking about in this election period, and that is, who is going to be put on those human rights commissions? Should some of them be removed? Should you pay attention to who you elect? Because if we play this out, Penna, I think eventually you're going to have states like Colorado, where I just used that example in the baker, or New York, where you just know that the Human Rights Commission is going to find you. And so some of these so-called blue states that are pro-gay, it's just going to be real hard for you to have a Christian business there. And you're just going to either have to live with it or try a different business. And that's going to be very different than what you see in, say, red states like Mississippi or something like that.
Yeah, we talk about a divided nation. This will further divide the nation. And, the other thing that's happening is a lot of states, most states have passed constitutional amendments defining marriages between one man and one woman. I don't know. The news media doesn't really report this very often, but most of the country still believes in traditional marriage. Most states, that's still the law of the land. But they're going after those. Through the courts, they're going after those amendments. And they're having varying different kinds of results, and this could go to the Supreme Court. So, it's a battle all over the country, and it does divide the country. So we've got Texas where we don't even think twice. We know that marriage is between a man and a woman, but you can go up to New England now, and it's not the case. I was just up in New York and Connecticut visiting relatives, and it's very different up there. I mean, we all know it's more liberal politically, but even the young people, I had a lot of nieces and nephews up there, and they're all the ages of our kids. But none of them are married or even thinking about getting married. They have a lot of cohabiting relationships and things going on. And, part of it is just that marriage is just not as important. When you do this to marriage, you actually destroy marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look, let's make the differentiation. I mean, there's a difference between, like, let's say a Texas that says marriage is a man and a woman, and this New York situation that says, no, we believe, man and man, woman and woman. That's not the differentiation. In Texas, they're not saying, if you don't believe that marriage is a man and a woman, we're going to destroy you. They don't do that.
No.
But in New York, that's what they're doing. They're saying, we don't allow people who have different religious beliefs. And that's just very, very dangerous, because once that power is given to the government, it can be applied to anything. And they're not going to stop with, whatever issue you like. There'll be an issue against you next. So people need to be careful before they fight for that type of power in the hands of government.
Last couple of weeks, I've had a chance to speak in Tony Evans' church every Wednesday night. And before I speak, they give me comment cards and questions. And one of the questions was kind of basically, with the homosexual issue, can't we just kind of have a live and let live philosophy? Well, I think most of us around the table sort of have allowed some of that to take place, but the gay agenda doesn't have a live and let live philosophy. And isn't that kind of what you're saying? I mean,
Absolutely.
We can say, we won't prosecute you, but they're saying, yeah, but we will come after you as Christians, and we will make sure that you pay a penalty for your belief.
And what it should be, and, we're going to have to litigate these things around the country, but what it should be is, in this country, you're right, you have a right to hold a different religious belief than everybody else. And the government can't come in, whether they're Human Rights Commission or whoever they are. And if we don't win those cases, then the country, and everybody, I'm not talking about just people on one side of this issue, everybody is going to lose their freedom.
Wow. Penna, final word, because you're the birthday girl. And first of all, happy birthday.
Thank you very much, and everybody have a great Labor Day weekend.
Well, we're excited about this opportunity. Everybody enjoy the Labor Day weekend. I want to say happy birthday to Penna, also to Chris behind the scenes, and Rob on our staff, and as well Andrew and Catherine. And so they have certainly been helping us produce this program today. But let me, before we finish off here, encourage you, if you would like to know a little bit more, this article on reasons ISIS is more dangerous than Al-Qaeda, one that I would certainly commend to you, the one that we talked about earlier with Charles Kruthammer on reasons and answers to inversion. And if you did not join us in the first hour, you certainly want to find Kelly Shackelford's Religious Rights Kit. Kids going back to school, this is a great resource. Take a copy, print one out, pass them on to your friends, and educate everybody. Thank you again for all that have been involved in this program. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday after Labor Day.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.